And so in the first world we began to grow and gain greater awareness and greater intelligence as we progressed. And as we progressed, we became fully aware that the holy people would refer to us constantly as their children. So we became fully aware that we were their offspring. But also there were 4 other beings of awareness that were in our midst that were not claimed by the holy people as their children. These beings would eventually become vegetation, insects, birds, and animals. These were also there with us, but we were fully aware of those beings and their presence. But we all grew and gained in awareness as we progressed through the first world until we could grow and gain entrance into the second world. The second world is the blue world, or the turquoise world. It was that in this existence we are told that we took on a spirit form, that we took on an actual form that was a spirit. In our spirit form we progressed through the second world, gaining greater awareness and greater intelligence. But we had retained as well all that we had gained as awareness and intelligence as we had progressed through the first world. And as we continued to grow and gain in awareness and progress to the second world, we gained greater understanding and awareness and intelligence. And it was that when we were able to, then we progressed to the next world, which is the third world. The third world is the yellow world. And the yellow world is where we are at today. This is the third world. You might think of the first world as a single-dimensional existence, and then the second world as a two-dimensional existence, and then here we are in a three-dimensional environment. And this is the third world, and it is the yellow world. The yellow world for many, many reasons. But basically the yellow sun, or the glow of the moon and the stars, or when you make a fire in the night it gives off the yellow glow. And then of course the pollen of all vegetation. We're told that the pollen is yellow. And it is that we use the corn pollen as a prayer offering. And generally we carry it in a pouch and we use it as a prayer offering. But the teaching is that all life form, anything that reproduces life, that it comes from yellow pollen. So it is that we, even as beings, you know, when you crack an egg, that's the largest example I could give you about all life forms coming from the yellow pollen. And so it is that that's what we are told, that we have our origin from yellow pollen. And so the teachings that sometimes our people get confused thinking that it means the yellow corn pollen is where we come from, but that's sometimes misunderstood as a teaching. But it is that in this world, this is the third world, the yellow world, everything in this world is set for us based on the sacred number 4. And it is that as all things are set for us based on the sacred number 4, when we arrive from the previous world as a spirit being, we enter this physical form that we are here at the top of the head. And it is at the top of the head that we have this spiral. Anoselka is where the root of the hair is into the skull, and then it lays into the continual growth direction. And this is where we are told that the spirit entered this physical form. This here area on the top of the head, the spiral, is a sacred area. But this spiral is not only found on our head, but it's also found on our fingertips. These are markings that are our identification markings. It is the markings, you know, that the holy people recognize us by. And it is that because we have these sacred markings on our hand, we are never to strike our children, never to strike another with the hand. And if there was a need to administer some type of corporal punishment to a child, it was that you would go out and you would harvest strands of yucca, 4, and then tie them together. Or if you needed to use a branch of a tree or something, that you would then take that walk and then you would harvest what you needed. You would tell the vegetation that you were harvesting from how you were going to use it to administer punishment. And then of course when you return with the yucca, 4 strands of yucca tied together, and you administered that whipping, you were to hit the legs, and you would only do it 4 times or 8 times, but never more than 12. And it was then after you'd done that, then you would take the yucca back out there and you would thank the vegetation of the yucca for using it to help you administer punishment. But many times you would, on your way to harvest the yucca, you would think of other ways to counsel your children so you wouldn't have to administer that physical punishment. And it was a good policy to follow. And of course the markings on the hands, there were always ways to preserve it, and so it's identified by this drawing of the spiral in the continual growth direction. And then of course when our spirit entered this physical form here at the top of the head, the sacred spot, we let out this cry from an emotional self. We become an emotional being for the very first time with that first cry. And that first cry is sort of over here on the side of fear or the discomfort. And then of course as we let out that cry, somebody picked us up, rocked us, fed us, cleaned us, made us comfortable. And we become a thinking being for the very first time, we are told. And then of course as we begin to use that ability to think, we become aware of our physical environment and our physical self. And so we are told we are 4 beings in one. We arrive as a spirit being, we become an emotional being, a thinking being, and then finally a physical being. So we are 4 beings in one. And then the teachings are that as a being with 4 sacred areas of us, that we are to continually grow in those 4 areas of our being in this, the 3rd world, in the yellow world. So everything is based on the sacred number 4 for us so that we can learn how to live in the next world, which is the 4th world. It is that we must grow continually spiritually, that we must grow continually emotionally, that we must grow continually mentally, and that we must grow continually greater aware of our physical environment and our physical self. And so at an early age we are taught these things. There are ceremonies that are performed for a young woman, a young girl when she becomes a woman, that lasts the 4 days. The first day is the spiritual teaching involved and received from the elder women. And the second day is the teachings of the emotional self, also received from the elder women and other relatives that might even be including the male relatives. And then the 3rd day would be the teachings of the need to learn and to gain knowledge of all of the various things of the person and individual's environment. And then finally, of course, to be aware of your physical self and how you conduct yourself in the eyes of your relatives and in the outside world. That you work, and to remain healthy you have to work and do labor. And so the traditional teachings at the end of the fourth day, of course, you take on the full meaning of what it is that one of the deities experienced as a woman, and that's the one that we refer to as changing woman, or stanatlehe, where at the end of 4 days that you have received all that she had received as an individual female. And so that's why that they can provide blessings to all of her relatives when she goes outside and they cut the cake, which is cooked in the ground, and it is laid out and poured into the corn husk that is laid in the continual growth direction. And so it is that when she stands there, she can provide blessings for all of her relatives and for strangers and for all of the people of the world. And because she has taken on the full meaning of the teachings of Asanatlehe, or changing woman. Now that's the female. It's a very gentle experience. The boy, when he becomes a man, that's a whole different ceremony. And that is that it's a sweat lodge ceremony. In a traditional setting, it was just the male relatives that would be in attendance. And so it is that it's understood that this is a coming of age ceremony for this young man, that he's no longer a boy. Now he has the responsibilities to grow and gain knowledge so he can someday provide for a family. And so all of the men harvest strands of yucca. Some might have 4, some might have 8, some might have 12. But they tie it together, of course, in the bundle. And as part of the sweat lodge ceremony, where you go in 4 times and come out after singing 4 songs to cleanse the spirit, the emotion, the mind, and the physical form, that when they enter the sweat lodge, they switch the boy with the strands of yucca, and everybody, you can lay on 4 whipping or 8 lickings or 12. And it's a very painful experience for the traditional setting where the youth experiences this ceremony. But it is to teach the young man that if he does not provide spiritual training and does not attend to the spiritual welfare of his family, the holy people will inflict great pain and great misery on you if you fail. And so therefore learn that this physical pain that you are feeling is nothing to what the holy people can administer as pain, where it is a spiritual pain and an emotional pain, a mental pain, a physical pain. All of this combined against you if you do not learn the traditional ways and provide your family in the future with traditional teachings. And of course the traditional teaching is that was, as the young man learned 4 ceremonies, that as he learned those 4 ceremonies, then he could be eligible to be given a wife. And in the traditional days and traditional past, that it was not that the young man would go out and seek out his spouse, and there was no dating or courting. It was that the families that would organize and approach each other. A young man, when he became the age of 24 perhaps, that he had learned the 4 ceremonies that he needed to know, that the uncle and the mother would get together and they would identify some clan group that this young man could marry into. And if they had a young woman over there that was of age, then they would approach that family and arrange for marriage between the boy and the girl. And generally the girl was older than 16 years old, and perhaps 18 and 19. And she would be offered up to families, and then the arrangements would be made. In the traditional way, this would be maybe the first time that that young man and that young woman sat near each other. It was in the traditional way, when such arrangements were made, that it was that all of the families would come together and the ceremonies would be conducted in a hogan, or hogan as we would call it. And the boy's relatives being on the south side, and then the girl's family on the north side. But in the actual setting, the girl would sit with the boy's family and the boy would sit with the girl's family. And it was in essence saying, we offer you our son, or we offer you our daughter. And so when the marriage was completed, it was the families were married through their children. And traditional marriages were, the divorce hardly ever occurred, because in those days, of course, the only thing that the man brought into the family was his medicine bundle and his saddle. That was probably his only property. It was that he was responsible for the spiritual welfare, and the woman would be responsible for the physical welfare. And so to her belonged all of the property, the home, the livestock, and even the children. And the only reason for divorce back in those days was if the man did not provide spiritual training and attended to the spiritual welfare of the family. And so if he failed to do that, all the woman would have to do is to set that man's saddle outside. And that would mean that that was the end of their union. But of course the man always had the opportunity to redeem himself, and he would be brought back into the fold of that family setting, that family unit. But of course there's 2 other areas of a person's being, like the emotional self. Mom is generally responsible for the emotional development of the children and the family. Dad helps. Dad's generally responsible for the mental development and the learning and the gaining of knowledge of how to take care of livestock and how to take care of property and how to do the various manual labor of attending to the needs of the family. And so it was that he was responsible as a man for the spiritual welfare. He helped with the emotional development, the mental development, and of course the physical care of his family. And so those were the traditional ways that our people conducted themselves in the marriage.